Hello everyone, my name is Ali and I'm a PhD student at University of Toronto in Canada in biomedical engineering, and I thought I'd create this video. I try to keep it brief, but I decided to create this video to help other graduate students in my position. So my background is electrical engineering. I did my undergrad in electrical engineering and my master's in electrical engineering. And when I started my PhD in biomedical engineering, I noticed there are some differences even in doing research, in conducting research between life sciences and engineering, because one of my advisors was actually in life science. She was a psychologist. So a lot of terminologies were different, and one of those was that I noticed. Yeah, we all do literature reviews in our research. Everybody in any field will have to do a literature review. But what was interesting was that literature reviews that I noticed in engineering was most of them were written by highly esteemed scientists in that field, that they write a literature review of what's been going on in that field. But when you're working in life science, usually the first publication you get out of your research is a scoping or a systematic or a type of literature review. And that was very new to me, and I was shocked. And it was like 2 months of searching and researching and see what kind of different reviews are. And my colleagues were mostly from life sciences. And they were surprised, because like they were surprised they never taught anybody those stuff. But I asked a lot of questions, and I finally gathered all the info to start my scoping review. But like it didn't, I didn't end up publishing it for some reason, because I had to pivot my research. But I learned a lot on how to do a scoping review, how to do a systematic review, and what are different literature reviews, especially in life sciences. And I decided to create this video for people out there who might be in the same position, don't know where to start, and this might be useful to them. The agenda for this video is to talk about the types of literature reviews, differences between specifically a scoping review and a systematic review, how to write a research question, when to visit a librarian, inclusion-exclusion criteria, Prospero, the timeline to publish, databases, how to create account and save searches, publications date limit, search criteria, and Boolean operations, and so on and so forth. So our first topic was systematic and scoping reviews. First of all the university websites, especially the ones having some sort of life sciences major in them, will have a guide on different systematic and different literature reviews. Don't forget to search. Just type on Google, type your university and then systematic review. What I did was when I was searching, I wrote University of Toronto scoping review, University of Toronto systematic review. And there are like really useful information in there which can really guide you. So this is one of the this is the library website for University of Toronto. You can search the definition of a scoping systematic review. What is a systematic review? What are the characteristics? So the main difference between a systematic review and a scoping review is that a systematic review is more specific and to the point. So your research questions should be more specific. And scoping reviews are more broad because you want to find gaps in the literature. And the other difference between systematic and scoping reviews is that a systematic review needs to have a metadata analysis inside of it. So usually at the end, before the conclusion, you have a metadata analysis in a systematic review. But in scoping review, you don't need to have that. Again, there's information on the scoping reviews here, how to do, like, there's guidance and stuff. I will share all these links on all the files that you see here. I will share all of those in the description of the video here on YouTube, and you can check it out later. I even upload my presentation here, so if you wanna look at it afterwards, feel free to do so. Yeah, as I said, the scoping review, the main difference is that because it's broader, it will find out the gaps in the literature in a very efficient way. The first step in conducting your literature review, excuse me, is to write your research question. And there are some rules on research questions. This link is very useful. It has some samples of bad research questions followed up with a good research question, excuse me, which can help you. So for example, this first research question says, what effects does social media have on people's minds? Well, what do you mean, what effects? What do you mean people's minds? What do you mean by people? And what do you mean by social media? It's very vague. It's not specific enough. But you can change it to what effect does daily use of Twitter have on the attention span of under 16-year-olds? So you have the people, you have the mind, attention span, and you have the social media, you have Twitter. A general rule in writing research questions, they shouldn't contain a yes or no. It shouldn't be a yes or no question. So it says, does the US or the UK have a better healthcare system? Well, it's not a yes no, but it's very like on what is like, how are you comparing these two? In what way? But the better question would be, how do the US and the UK compare in health outcomes and patient satisfaction among low-income people with chronic illnesses? And just wanted to show you one of them. Okay, yeah, here. So has there been an increase in homelessness in San Francisco in the past 10 years? Well, it's not a research question, it's just a yes/no question, which is not, again, it's not like novel enough. So you can change it to, how have economic, political, and social factors affected patterns of homelessness in San Francisco over the past 10 years? This is a research question. You can do research on it. So if you don't know your research question, this is not something you do on your own. You work with your advisor on developing it. So yeah, and definitely, if you want your research question for your literature review, it's really good to get help from the librarian, and because those people are amazing at these. They're not experts in your field, but they're experts in developing your research questions, developing objectives, developing keywords, finding keywords, search criteria. They're amazing at this. So for my research, was the sample that my research question was, how a multi-domain assessment of concussion that simulates the multi-domain conditions of a sport assists in clinical decision-making of return to play following a concussion. This is what I came up with while talking with my advisors. Regarding this research question, the objectives of my scoping review was threefold. So my first objective was, what clinical tools are available for use in return to activity decision-making following a concussion? So it has the return to play following a concussion and clinical decision making, and the tools. What is the content and format of clinical tools available for RTA decision making following a concussion? So we wanted to know what tools are out there, and to what extent do current clinical tools used in RTA decision making capture the multi-domain impacts of concussion and slash or implement multi-domain. So this is the question that will find a gap in the knowledge. So my research question was how a multi-domain assessment of concussion that simulates the multi-domain conditions of sport. So this is what I'm designing. I'm designing a multi-domain assessment of concussion. First step is to see what gaps are there in the knowledge. Maybe somebody has done it. So this is what I'm looking at. This is the gap that I'm looking at. So this is how you develop a research question. You get help from a librarian. You figure out your keywords, and then you find your objectives, and then you try to refine your objectives by talking to your advisors or any other person working on the project in your group. But definitely do these steps. So regarding my research question, these are my sample keywords. When I talked to the librarian, she helped me to develop way more than these. Like, these are just the primary keywords that I came up with, but she was amazing. Like, she talked to me on how to expand, how to be more broad in my keyword selection. But these are some samples: concussion, MTBI, brain injury, multi-domain. You need to go to the librarian with some keyword samples of your own, because she's not an expert in your field, or he's not an expert in your field, but they can help you develop and include more by seeing some of your keywords. The next item in the agenda is the inclusion and exclusion criteria. This is, I think, one of the most important questions or parts of conducting a review, because when you do a review, you'll end up with thousands or hundreds or thousands of papers when you conduct your search, and not all of them is relevant to your research questions, and not all of them should be included in your scoping or systematic review. So what you do is, before removing any articles, you come up with an inclusion and exclusion criteria. Some inclusion and exclusion criteria, like some of the keywords, you just remove some of the keywords. It's not relevant to your project. Maybe you made a mistake. Maybe you pivot the project. You definitely should discuss this within the group, with your advisors, with your peers, to come up with an inclusion-exclusion criteria. Another example of an exclusion criteria that could be used during your search is the year of the publication. For example, you don't want to go before a certain time, or you want to just look at the between like 2010 or 2000 to 2015. Again, that's your inclusion criteria. Then you can include that in your search, and it will remove some of the papers before even you look at even the abstracts or the titles of the paper. Again, going back to my own project, my inclusion criteria was studies were included if they met this inclusion criteria. They should have been peer reviewed. So conference abstracts weren't included. They should have been in English, and they should use any tool or equipment to assess at least one concussed patient in any period after the concussion. So if they assessed on some data that was available from concussed people, I wouldn't include it. They should, even if it's an experimental tool, they should be testing that tool on one concussed patient. And my exclusion criteria was that the studies were excluded if they didn't use the tool on concussed individuals, or even if they stated that the tool can potentially be used on concussed patients but tested only healthy people, they were excluded. The other exclusion criteria I had was that the papers should be published after 2008. That was something that we came up with my advisor. I forgot to write it down here, but that was one of the other exclusion criteria. So papers before 2008 were all excluded. So remember, inclusion and exclusion criteria, the most important step. It's even more important than your research question. After you come up with your research question and everything, there's a website that there's an unwritten rule that you should be registering your literature review. You should be registering your literature review. The website is called Prospero. Again, I will include the link for you. You go to Prospero, you join, you answer these questions. It's really easy to join. These are optional. You don't need to include those. And then after you joined, you go to the main page. You can either register your review, or you can search for your review to see if anybody else has done it or is doing it. So if your exact research question, or very similar to it, is somebody else is doing or have done it in recent years, there's no point in you conducting that research again. So for example, let's write, so for my case, it was concussion assessment. I do this, I read all these to see if anybody has done it or been doing it. So it says from 2015, it says review ongoing. If it is the case, it might have been published, that they did forget to update this, or maybe they pivoted, they were undecided, they didn't even update here. That's one of the things. And then there's another thing that you can register your criteria. So you have to, your inclusion criteria, there is Prospero. It has its own inclusion criteria to see if your study is eligible to be registered here. And you answer these questions. You can literature. You can register your literature review. Is this a scoping literature mapping review? Yes. Register your review now. So it doesn't accept scoping reviews, but if it is a systematic review, you can go ahead, and I don't want to bore you with it. Go through it. If you have any, it's pretty straightforward. If you have any question, just write down in the comment section, and I try to answer it. It's a pretty straightforward process. And I wrote 6-month rule here. The reason I wrote that is because there's an unwritten rule that from the time you register on Prospero, you have 6 months to submit your publication, your paper. If it's more than 6 months, they will ask you to redo your search before submission. That's why I wrote the 6-month rule. And the other thing is, if you submit it within the 6 months, but the reviewers took a long time and it's been like a year since you registered on Prospero, sorry, they will ask you to redo the search and include new papers that have came up during that time, and include them in your paper. Yeah, that's basically it. Some reviewers don't care about the 6 months rule, but I think that makes sense, because if it's like too long after your search, a lot of papers have been published since, and you need to, if you want to be thorough, you need to be including those in that paper. Again, there are a lot of databases for you to search. Again, go through your library. I'm sure you'll find databases that your university has contracts with, and you can use them. For my case, it was I used Medline and Embase, which is part of Ovid, and I used Cinol and another one called the Sports Discuss, which are part of EBSCO, but there are like PsycInfo, there's Web of Science, Scopus, basically, and you can even use Google Scholar for your search, but Google Scholar is too broad, and it's like really difficult to narrow down, so nobody uses those. And you have to mention in your methods section which databases you used, and then and then sometime you might find a paper that is relevant to your topic, but it's from a different source, so you have to include that too. You say like, yeah, I found some paper. For my case, I found some papers from a professor's website, lab website. I couldn't find it in any databases, but I found it there, and I went to Google Scholar and searched those paper titles, and I found those papers, but it didn't come up in these 4 databases. So it's important to do that. When you find your databases, the other thing you need to do when you found your databases, you're okay with the databases you want to search within, you have to come up with your search strategy. And search strategy is where the librarian can help you again. You came up with your keywords, and now it's time to do your search strategy. Just want to look at, okay. Sorry. Yeah, because everything needs to be included in the paper. Your search strategy, the data that you extracted, number of papers that you found using each database, everything needs to be included in your paper submission. And the reason behind that is the searches need to be reproducible. So somebody else who is reading your paper needs to know your exact searching method or search strategy and your searching operation to go. For example, if you're using a Scopus, they can copy and paste your search strategy in a Scopus and find the papers as you did. If they limit the timeline to your timeline, they need to come up with the exact number of papers that you found at that time. So that's why everything needs to be clear. The fun part for engineers in this case is Boolean operations. How you search, you use a lot of Boolean operations, which is actually kind of fun. That's like I really enjoyed. And I'm in a minute I'm going to show you. But before I show you, University of Waterloo's library website has a very detailed tutorial on how to conduct searches in different databases. For example, this is from Scopus. One of the things that is really fun is the star. Star truncates your word. For example, if you write If you write, let's go here. If you write injure star, you mean that you're including the word injured, injury, injuring, whatever word you can find that has the 5 letters injure in the beginning. And then pre in Scopus means the word precedes by another word, so it's another word comes before the word you're writing down there, and then with n. So for example, pre to means that we want, for example, like we want the word injury to come 2 words after the other word that we're writing here. So for example, if we write injury pre to brain, or the other way around, I have to write it the other way around, but let's look at it this way. So we mean that if injury and brain are within 2 words of each other in that paper or in that abstract, they should be included. And W means, again, if return with to activity. This means if return is within 2 words of brain activity. So again, just to be clear, I made a mistake with the injury. It means injury, brain precedes injury by 2 words. So it's exactly brain, 2 words, injury, and then here activity, return within 2 words. If we have activity, it would be included. That paper would be included in your search. This is Scopus. This is Medline, Embase. Again, well, some of the words are different. For example, here you have the word exp, which means explode. You mean like when you write, I will show you in a minute, but if you write exp brain injury, it will give you all the papers that have the phrase brain injury in them. All the papers. That means that's what explode means. And the other one, so for Medline, you have brain adjacent, for example, to injure star. So the word, instead of pre or W, we have one, which is adjacent. It means that if brain and injury are adjacent or within 2 words of each other, it means that there are 2 words between them, but still we have brain and injury. That paper will be included. So, and if you write MP, it will go through the whole article, except the references, of course. It will go through the whole article, but if you write ABS, it will only search the abstract or title. That's another thing that we should be careful if we want to. So in my case, I try to be broad, so I try to include as many papers as I want in my search and then delete them later if they're not relevant by reading the abstract. So I used EXP and MP a lot because I wanted to go through, find the keywords in the paper itself, not just the abstract or the title. I didn't want to limit my search. Before we go here, I wanted to show you one of my search strategies in a second. Okay, this is Medline. You should create an account when you come to Medline to save your search, because trust me, you will do a lot of search, a lot, like a number of times. So when you go here, you go to search, and then you can write your criteria here. You can write whatever you want. You go to multi-field search here, and you write your first criteria, second criteria, third criteria, whatever you want. You add your row, and then you can use and or not, all the three. And then there are limits. The publication year you can limit to between 2011 to 2020. That's it. And then, like, when you include here, you can do your search. Let's go to my workspace. I'm going to show you one of my own searches. Look at here. I did 6 search. Just look at it. Like, I did 6 times because I refine the search and then do the search again. That's why I have 3 different search. I'm just zooming in. Here, I have 19 lines. I started with a concuss star MP, so if the title, abstract, or the whole paper. I had exploded brain concussion. I had mild, adjacent with 3, brain injury, and then again whole paper. Virtual reality, user computer. These all came up with talking to the librarian. I didn't have these, but I'm so happy that I talked to them, because they helped me realize to make it more broad. So again, this is one of the more sophisticated ones. It has simulation, virtual or computer, or adjacent 5, environment, sport, play, game. And then we have return, adjacent 4, sport, play, duty, activity, game. So we have game star, which is game, gaming, fly, drive, whatever. And then again, we have assess. Same thing. Again, we have all these backslashes, which means MP. Slash, not backslash, which means MP. Again, abstract, title, and a whole paper. Again, and at the end, I ORed lines 9, 11, 12, or 13. 9, 11, 12, or 13, which are all talking about assessments. And then I ORed line 1, 2, 3, 4, 15, and 16, which all talk about the brain injury. I ORed lines 5, 6, 7, 8, or 10, which are all talking about the assessments, the simulations, the games, whatever. And then I AND lines 14, 17, and 18, because I want all of these to be in a title, abstract, or the whole paper. I AND all of them, and then it will give me the result. So let's run this. Let's run this. You can see how long it takes to run each line separately. It will run here on Medline. Again, I didn't put the year limits. I could, but I can do it later when the search is done. We should just wait for the search to be over, and then we can see what happens. So the search is done. Just waiting for the papers to show up. Yeah. So here, you can see that 305 papers showed up. This is the last line. But if you expand this, you can see how many papers show up in each line of your code. So, for example, concuss, 18,000 papers. MTBI, 5,000. This is the biggest one, which is the assessment. 332,000 papers. But at the end, by ANDing all of them, I get 305, which is interesting. When your search is done, you don't want to read all of these here. You'll use a reference manager. So, but first, let's download the search. Download the papers that we found here. You click on all of them. If you're happy with your search, you can change the specific years or the publication type. You can say I only want journal articles. You can specify a range, but let's just say I want all of these papers. I click on export, and then I export on a RIS format. This is what I like to do, and then in your download, you can have citation abstract subject headings, complete reference, and custom. I usually do this, and I click export, and it will download the RIS file for me. Let's do this search with Embase as well. It looks the same because Embase and Medline are both part of Ovid. Again, I go to my workspace. I go to my searches and alerts, and then run this again. Let's see how many papers I get here. Again, because they're the same database, the search criteria, the syntax, everything is the same, and it will show me the papers in a second. Yeah, so the search is done. Again, 305 papers makes sense because they're mostly search the same database. Again, I click on all, I export. This might not be the case all the time because they have different journals inside of them. This might not be the case in your search criteria, okay? Don't think that if you search Medline, you will have the same in Ovid. That's not the case. So yeah, let me delete this because I don't want this to affect my search. Again, they're the same database, so it doesn't let's delete, remove these lines. Okay, now I have this search. Again, I export in RIS format. I download it. Again, yeah, the RIS file is downloaded. The next item in my agenda is reference managers. I use Mendeley. There are other reference managers too, like EndNote. Mendeley is free. You can integrate it with LaTeX. You can integrate it with Word. You can just simply input your reference into Word, and it's like, honestly, it's really simple, and it's free. Let me show you Mendeley. So you start Mendeley, you create an account. The good thing about Mendeley is that since it's free, when you have your papers on your laptop, the PDFs, for example, whenever you log in on a different computer and sign in to your account, you'll have the PDFs. It might take a bit to download, but you'll have it. So it's sort of like a cloud storage, and it's awesome. So let's import the files, I'm going to show you what can we do with Mendeley. Let's create a new folder, call it new, and then I'm gonna just drag and drop the RIS files. This is the first RIS file. It will give you all the papers that you found, and then the second RIS file, just drop, and then you have all the documents again, all the same papers. The good thing about it is that, okay, for your search, you will for your review, you will search multiple databases, okay? But you will have a lot of duplicates. That's for sure. You will have a lot of duplicates, okay? This is 100%, because a lot of them use the same journals, have the same journals. So your search will your searches has the same keywords. So same papers, duplicates will show up. So you Control A, you select all these papers, you go to Tools, and then you click on Check for Duplicates, and then you confirm Merge, and that's it. It will merge all the duplicates, and you don't have to worry about those anymore. And that's it. That's as easy as it gets. Again, you go to check for duplicates, you see there's no duplicate here anymore. It merged all the papers, all the duplicates basically. This is one of the best things about Mendeley. It will detect duplicates. And if I wanted to show you the references, okay, so if you want to include a reference here, for example, I want to write a reference here. I go to, let's assume that I want to input a reference here. I go insert citation. I search for one of the papers, this paper, for example. Here, and then your paper will show up here because this is a footnote. The paper showed up here in the footnotes. You can manage that to not show up as a footnote, show up as like real bibliography, basically. Yeah, so this is the good thing about Mendeley. You can do that. The only downside of using Mendeley is that you can't find PDFs here. You can't find the PDFs through here, obviously, because they need you to know that you have access to that journal article. But if somehow you have access to that article and you have the PDF, you can go here, add file, and find a PDF for that paper and upload it here. And now you have the PDF on every computer that you log in using your Mendeley account. Any Mendeley, anywhere, you will have that PDF. It just takes a bit of time to download. And whenever, if you don't have Adobe PDF Reader, you can just read it here. And if you want to just read the abstracts here easily, you can read the abstracts here. You don't even need the PDF. Just read the abstract here, and you can say if it is relevant, it is relevant to your search or not, and you can just remove it. This is what is great about Mendeley. It's so quick. You just click on the link, click on the papers, and start reading abstracts. You don't need to read full papers at first. You just need abstracts, and you have all your papers here, and you have the duplicates removed, and it's perfect. You just read the abstracts. And this is another feature of the Mendeley. Yeah, and then after abstract reading, you go to full text reading, because, well, sometimes the abstract is deceiving. You think that this is relevant, but you read the whole paper and you see it is not, and then you remove it. Before I go forward, I just remember something. Usually in scoping reviews and systematic reviews, you don't include other literature reviews. Usually, it depends on the case, but usually that's the case. You don't include other reviews in your own scoping review. The data extraction after the full text reading, after removing all the papers that are irrelevant, you'll have X number of papers that are relevant to your search, relevant to your research questions, and you wanted to extract data. Again, you go talk to your advisor, to your colleagues, and in the group, you will come up with a strategy to extract data. First of all, you want to know what data you're extracting, what is it that you're looking for, and then you will you will do that by reading the full text again. You might end up reading the full text a few times. I ended up with like 82 papers and read them. I read them I think 4 or 5 times. 84 papers full text. It happens. Our data extraction criteria changed quite a bit, so I had to reread all the papers. But the good thing about this is that if you have somebody in your group who is from life sciences, especially if your advisor is from that, they know how difficult it is to conduct scoping or systematic reviews. So you have to do it in a team. You'll end up with thousands of papers. So I started with, I think it was close to 1,000 papers that I had to read 1,000 abstracts to remove the papers. And then after that, I ended up with, I think 200, and I read 200 full texts and ended up with 82. And I had help. There was a master's student working on the same project, and the student helped me with the abstract reading, full text reading, and data extraction. Usually you don't split the papers, you do it independently. If the papers aren't like crazy large number of papers, if they're not like thousands of papers, you read them independently. You read the abstracts independently. You say like, yeah, you read it today, I read it again. And then you start writing down the reason you're removing those papers. And then you see, ideally you want to end up with the same number of papers. But that's like ideal. That never happens. And then, for example, you start with 800 papers. I read them and I end up with 200. And the other person reads them and ends up with 210. And then we find those 10 papers and we discuss them to see if we should include them or not. And that's the thing. There's always this back and forth, this all discussion, this all like a collaboration. It's amazing. Like, and that's the first thing you do in your project for your PhD or master's, and it gives you all these experiences collaborating with other people, and that's amazing. After you're done with everything, there is something called Prisma flowchart. This is small here, so I want to go and show you the larger version. This is a Prisma flowchart. This should be included in your paper. And you say, okay, records identified through database searching, additional records identified through other sources. Remember I said like maybe Google search or whatever. After duplicates removed, you get this. Records is screened, abstract reading. This is the number of excluded papers. And then you read full text. This is the number of excluded papers after full text reading, and you have to come up with the reasons. You have to mention why those papers were excluded. And then studies included in quantitative analysis, studies included in quantitative synthesis, and then meta-analysis. Meta-analysis is not applicable to scoping reviews. It's just for systematic reviews. But you'll have this flow chart in your review for sure. You need to have. Without this, they won't accept your paper. This is really important. Let's look at a sample paper, sample scoping review. It's really simple to find out if this is a scoping systematic review or regular literature review just by looking at abstract. You have the objective, you have the design. This is a scoping review. If it's a systematic review, you have to write systematic review. You have the databases, Medline, Central, ERIC, PubMed, CINAHL Plus, Academic Search Complete, whatever. Like there are a couple of data sources. And then you have a study selection, which is the inclusion criteria, basically. Data extraction and results. See, like even by just looking in abstract, you can figure out, well, the title too. The title says social media use among patients and caregivers, scoping review. That's clear, as clear as it gets. But let's assume you don't see the title. Just by looking at abstract, you can figure out if it is a scoping review, a systematic review, or a regular literature review. Then you have the introduction. You talk about your objectives, the reason you want to do this literature review here. There have a couple of objectives. You have the method. You have the searcher strategy. They would have all the Boolean things in the supplementary material or appendix, probably. You have so there are a lot of tables when it comes to them, to scoping reviews. There are a lot of tables because you have to show the results. Like you have to show, okay, this paper said all these. This paper I got these data from, and things like that. But these are all based on your data extraction method and your objectives. You have to answer your objectives. When someone reads your paper, at the end, they want to go back to objectives, read the objective, and say, okay, this makes sense. You had these questions, and now you've answered them. Again, this is the Prisma flowchart. You see, this is the Prisma flowchart. And these are the tables they included, and usually at the end, you have a discussion for sure. We have different tables and graphs, and usually at the end you have limitations. You have to talk about like what are the limitations of your search. It's usually from your objectives or from your search strategy or from your data extraction, mostly data extraction, because you can look at a paper from different perspectives. Maybe someone looks at it in a different perspective and gets something else. You look at it from another perspective and got something else. These are you usually include those in your limitations. And the way I found this was I just went to Google Scholar. I wrote scoping review sample. And you can see all the titles have a scoping review in them. Just by looking at these, you can have tens of thousands of scoping reviews, and you can do the same with systematic review. See, systematic review, systematic review, systematic review. All the titles show that. At the end, I wanted to share with you some useful links and files. First of all, if you want to really know what a scoping review is, I'm sure there are some similar articles for systematic reviews too. But for scoping review, the first person that made it a method or created a framework was these two professors. In 2005, this is the paper, but there's a shorter, more brief paper that is amazing to read by Danielle Levac. If you read that, you'll get all the information you want on the scoping reviews and how to write them, how to do the data extraction, who needs to help you, how to search. It's amazing. It's not a tutorial, but it's it explains the method of conducting a scoping reviews, but you have to do the research questions and everything yourself. It's not a tutorial, but it gives you the foundation of conducting a scoping reviews. I will share all these files, links, and everything in the description, and I hope that I helped some of you. And if you have any questions, comments, you can comment in below the video, and I'd be more than happy to look over them. And any feedback is appreciated. I always want to learn more. And thank you, and have a good day or night.